So, first off, who is Edgar Allan Poe? Well, when we think about Edgar Allan Poe, we think about a mysterious man who seemed to be obsessed with murders and madmen and morbid and premature burials and the supernatural and mysterious women that return from death. But in all, he really was not that type of person. He was born January 19th, 1809 in Boston, Massachusetts, and he died October 7th, 1849 in Baltimore. He lost both of his parents at the age of 3. And his life is a pretty sad story as he's lost his wife, his mother, his foster mother, and his brother all from tuberculosis. He released his first collection of poems, Tamerlane and Other Poems, in 1827, and the second collection, but those are not very well known as his works such as Annabel Lee and The Raven. The narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym's Nantucket is the only full-length novel written by Poe, and between the period of 1835 and 1845, he released his best-known poem, as I mentioned, Tales of Heart, The Father of the House of Usher, The Raven, Murder in Rue Morgan, those are short stories. The publication of The Raven, however, made him a household name in January of 1846. His work marks him as one of the originators of both the horror and science fiction / detective murder mystery fiction. And he's considered to be the architect of modern short stories. Another author's work consists of poetry, short stories, a novel, textbook, hundreds of essays and book reviews, because he was an editor at some point in his career, and also a book on scientific theory. Cool. So, what is this novel about? Well, this novel is about a man named Arthur Gordon Pym, of course, and he stowed away on a ship called the Grampus. However, without him knowing, the ship gets caught up in so many different life or death situations. So, the story itself is very gruesome as he tries to survive because he is first stowed away in the bottom of the ship, and he only has a limited amount of water, a limited amount of food, and eventually, as he notices something happening, as he's supposed to get out, he's not getting out. So, he gets so wise on the ship. Well, he wants to seek adventure. He has a friend named Augustus Bernard who tells him all these stories about life in the sea and adventures, and he wants to do this, but he knows his grandfather not approved. So Augustus stores him away at the bottom of the brig, and hopefully when they reach a certain distance to the point where turning back is impossible, then he will reveal himself. However, that really doesn't happen. So, what does happen? Well, Pym tries to survive, but somehow he knows Augustus is supposed to come and get him, but he hasn't. So his food supply is going down, his water supply is going down, and his mind is getting to the point where it's getting a little delirious. But then he discovers that a mutiny has occurred on board. And so, with the help of Augustus and one of the mutineers who helped Augustus, Dick Peters, they help take back the brig, only to be bombarded with a violent storm that eventually destroys the ship. And while waiting for help, the men on the ship, and this includes a new man named Richard Parker, who's also another mutineer who joins them, and they try to survive on their own, but it eventually becomes very difficult to the point where only Dick Peters and Pym survives. And so when they do survive, they get help from a passing ship that takes them on an expedition to the South Pole, where they encounter yet more problems involving a group of natives. So who are the major characters? Well, we have Arthur Gordon Pym. We have Augustus Bernard, the friend of Arthur Gordon Pym, who stores him away in the ship. And keep in mind, the ship named the Grampus, the captain of the ship is actually Augustus' father. You have Dirk Peters. Dirk Peters spares the life of Augustus by putting himself in danger too. He's very different from the other characters. He's a mixed race. He's the son of a Native American woman and a fur trader. And his appearance in the book is described as very ferocious. He's not a man to be messed with. Very obvious. There's Richard Pocket. Richard Pocket is one of the mutineers who is spared by Peters, Bernard, and Pym. Eventually, he doesn't meet a very happy ending, but he is essential for helping the characters survive throughout the novel. Captain Guy. Captain Guy will be not introduced until later on into the novel. He eventually arrives as help to the Peters and Pym when they are on their ship. That destroyed ship, actually. Then there's Chubit. Chubit appears in the story for a very brief amount of time. He is the chief of the natives in the island of South Pole, and eventually when he's in the novel, he first appears as friendly. He's very naive. He's not very aware of all the things. He believes that the ship has a life. He's very shocked by his own appearance, but it turns out he cannot be trusted because he's very smart, and they unfortunately did not raise their suspicions well when it came to the natives. So when we talk about the history and the cultural significance of the story, you have to understand that this novel was born out of dark romanticism in the mid-1800s, and Edgar Allan Poe is mostly known for dark romanticism. This novel was published in 2 different installments in 1837 in the Southern Literary Messenger. The Southern Literary Messenger is where Poe was an editor, and it helped advance his career, helped him publish all the things that we know him now as The Telltale Heart, The Raven, and so while the story where Poe was influenced by an article he read in the newspaper, and he thought, I should write a story about this. And he always wanted, he did have experience on the sea, so it helped propel the story forward. And there are elements present throughout the novel of dark romanticism, such as, a plot arranged around crisis moments that occur. There's so many crises occurring throughout this novel. There's tragedy, there's horror, and there's this idea, if you ever read the novel, that the universe is very irrational. You cannot control it. So many different things happen. So what are some things in the story? Well, alcoholism is one thing. During this time period, people are known to be drinking, but we're drinking all the time. But in this novel particularly, many of the characters do tend to get drunk. They don't just drink to drink, but drink to get drunk. It's seen with the mutineers, which is why the mutineers eventually perish. They got caught off guard while they were drunk. One example of getting caught off guard while they're drunk is Peter, Bernard, and Pocket. When they're starving and they find a bottle of wine, they drink it. But unfortunately, because they've been so dehydrated and they've been starving, the alcohol takes an immediate effect, and it gets to the point where they're so intoxicated that they cannot be responsible for their own safety, which puts pressure on Pym, is highlighted in the story. There's also brutality. The story is very, very brutal. The one example of brutality is the first mutiny, in which the people who were not mutineers were executed one by one. They were gagged, and then each one was killed with an axe blow to the head, and then their bodies were thrown overboard. Another theme is survival, especially from Pym. Pym tends to survive nearly every single ordeal in the story. And one is his survival of him being entombed in a small cave in the South Pole, and he eventually survived that, but it's probably because he survived being trapped in a small compartment, being trapped on a ship. He's been able to use that to better himself and keep himself alive. Another type of things that we see in the novel is irony. There's a lot of examples of irony. Two of them are responsible for a turning point. One is the mutiny that is started by Pym, Peter, and Bernard. They take the ship away from the people who started the first mutiny. Unfortunately, after that, they eventually get into a storm, and that destroyed their ship. Another example of irony is Richard Parker's ultimate sacrifice. Richard Parker tells the men when they're shipwrecked, one of us has to die so the rest of us can survive. He suggests cannibalism. And unfortunately, he is the one that is sacrificed because he draws the shortest piece of wood. And it's a really silly case of irony in this case. Another device is metaphors. One metaphor in particular is Pym's nightmare at the beginning of the story in chapter 2, when he's trapped in a compartment with no food, no water, well, a little food, a little water. He's a little delirious and he has these very vivid dreams. And one is a lion that is laying on his body, suffocating him, which is an example of that small compartment when he's being suffocated. In the instant that animal instinct survives, should be coming out when you are starving, but it cannot be suffocated by the small compartment and its lack of food and water and no human contact. So, symbolism. There are plenty of examples of race relations in this story. One is the cook. The cook who leads the mutineer is black, but he's also described as a perfect demon. Another example of race relation is Dirk Peter, another mutineer, and he's described as ferocious, but he's also known for having a face that is very scary. His face is described as deformed, even though he is the child of a Native American and a fur trader. His hands are not seen as human. He appears bald. They're not positive description toward people of color, especially toward the natives who are described as black. They're not described positivity. Another example of symbolism is the reanimation of the dead. One post-work does involve frequent use of reanimation of death. This case is not an actual reanimation, but more of a pretending to be a ghost, as Pym pretends to be the ghost of one of the poisoned crew members to scare the drunk mutineers so they can take the ship. So it's not exactly bringing back the dead, but bringing back the dead in a spiritual sense rather than a physical sense. Another is the psychosis of the men. This is very, very common in post-war. And perfect example of psychosis of the men is when they're drunk and they're intoxicated. They are not thinking straight. Their mind. That's why they can easily be tricked that a dead person is alive and they lose their ship. Or with Pym, he can lose his grip on reality, lose track of time. He can't focus. He can't think. He has vivid dreams. His brain is just cheap. His psychosis is getting dark and he cannot keep track of his own reality. Another example of symbolism is the effect of decomposition. This occurs throughout the story. The first example is the death of Hartman Rogers. His decomposition is his belly swelled, his hands swelled, but his face shriveled up, his skin shriveled up, he has red blotches on his face. And another example is the ghost ship. When the four companions are shipwrecked, the ship, they think is their salvation. Unfortunately, it's not their salvation because it turns out to be a ghost ship, and all the passengers and the crew members are all dead and decomposing on the ship, and they can actually smell the decomposition. Another one is the death of Augustus, unfortunately, and then Augustus likely dies from an infection, also accompanied by dehydration, starvation, and because of the condition of his body before he was dead, once decomposition does occur, when they try to throw his body aboard, his leg completely comes off. And so the effect of decomposition, it really just adds to the tragedy and the horror of the story. But it's very much something that Poe is known for using in his works. So, the novel, I personally enjoyed the novel, but it's difficult to comprehend due to the structure. So sometimes the story is written as diary entry, and sometimes the story is just narrating things as they go along. So it can be a little confusing when you're reading the story. Sometimes the diction can be a little, well, the diction is very different from that time period to ours. So sometimes it can be difficult to understand certain things, but it's very much a large combination of different things about Poe. And it's kind of a mixture, which can make it confusing because he puts so much of himself in the story. But Poe himself is not a big fan of the story. He called it a silly little book. When this book came out, it was not a popular book. It's not considered his best work, but since then people are much more open to it now. But the book is shocking. It has so much violence in it. There's violence, death of Augustus, there's violence in the mutiny, there's violence in the cannibalism. It's just so much violence. The storm, shark attack, animal attack. It's just pure brutality. So, would I recommend rereading it? Yeah, because it cannot be comprehended with just one reading. Certain things need to be rereaded to be understood. The story is cool. I will admit it's very cool, and it's a lot for it. It's very detailed, vividly detailed, and if you cannot stomach certain details, it might not be for you. But this book is really about tackling that bottom pit of darkness deep inside the mind of the man. It really does. It really plays with that idea. It really wants to know, what would a man do to survive? And what can a man do to survive? Story, I'm going to ruin it for you. The final scene is on a cliffhanger. We have no idea what happened. A whale appears, and that's it. Story ends. But there's an after note beyond the story that states that Pym is alive, but unfortunately he died before he can finish telling Poe what happened. But Pym is not real. It's not, but it's fiction, and it's based on a newspaper article and some experiences of Poe. But I recommend this book to anyone who likes horror and anyone who's looking for something really good to read. It's really good, but it can be a difficult book. But anyway, thank you. Bye.